Mr. Chair, Committee, thank you very much. My name is Kevin Vick. I appreciate the opportunity to address you today. I am the owner and president of Crucible Arms, a federal firearm licensee dealer operating in Lakeville, Minnesota. I sell and transfer firearms to Minnesotans in accordance with existing laws. This includes a purchaser providing valid government-issued identification, a permit to purchase or a permit to carry, and utilization of the FBI National Instant Background Check System, otherwise known as NICS. This bill, as you know, would utilize the same process in an expanded capacity to include all legal private transfers of these firearms. Private transfers, as has been cited, consist of less than 10% of total firearm transfers. The intentionally misleading 40% figure being bandied about is simply a falsehood. That grossly inflated number, as has been said, was based solely on a 20-year-old survey and, more importantly, was conducted prior to the establishment of our current NICS system. If you eliminate inheritance and the passing down of heirlooms to family members, the number of firearm transfers not subject to the NICS check is approximately 10%. The overwhelming majority of firearm transfers are done through NICS background check system, including gun show sales. As has been said, the gun show loophole is also a fallacy. 98% of firearm sales at gun shows go through people like me, FFL dealers, and they are subject to NICS checks. The balance are private transfers between private citizens and is included in the 10% this bill seeks to address. So, even if it's only 10%, wouldn't it be better for public safety if we applied a universal background check to these transfers? As someone who works with the NICS background check system on a regular basis, let me tell you why this bill will have minimal, if any, impact on deterring gun crime. The current NICS system relies on voluntary compliance by all states to provide current, accurate data to the system. This is generally unfunded by the federal government or the states. Here is a result of this voluntary unfunded effort. FBI Assistant Director of the Criminal Justice Information Services Division, David Cuthbertson, in his U.S. Senate testimony stated, quote, "Several continuing challenges and obstacles have been reported. Among these challenges are limitations including the manpower to accomplish the added duties and responsibilities associated with the management and maintenance of information submitted to the NICS. Other issues identified include outdated information technology and the inability to submit records electronically," unquote. As has been testified earlier today, background checks need to be meaningful. I agree with that completely. Limited resources, however, results in gaps and omissions in the NICS database system. These gaps and omissions are significant. In a study commissioned by Mayors Against Illegal Guns, which includes members Minneapolis Mayor Ryback and St. Paul Mayor Coleman, Minnesota ranks 18th in the country on the number of mental health records submitted to the NICS system per 100,000 residents. For comparison, Arizona is ranked ahead of Minnesota at 15th, and Virginia is ranked first in the country. Yet NICS background checks did not prevent two mass murderers from legally obtaining handguns used in the Gabrielle Giffords mall shooting in Tucson and the Virginia Tech school shooting. Remember, Arizona is ranked ahead of Minnesota and Virginia is ranked number 1 in mental health record compliance, yet both sold handguns legally to mass murderers. Let me be clear. I am a lifetime NRA member, a federally licensed firearm dealer, and a law-abiding citizen gun owner. I want, as much as anybody, perhaps more, to reduce and, as much as possible, eliminate gun crime. I support the NICS background check, as does the NRA, and want the gaps and inefficiencies in the current system addressed. What I can't support is putting additional burden on an existing flawed system at the expense of 10% of law-abiding citizens exercising their rights to bear arms for self-defense. Notice I said law-abiding citizens. It's critical in this argument. The overwhelming reason universal background checks will not be effective in reducing gun crime is quite simple and beyond argument, in my humble opinion. Criminals have not and will not subject to any kind of universal background check. They are criminals. They, by and large, obtain their firearms illegally. According to the ATF, 73% of guns used in crimes are obtained through straw purchases and theft. There was some testimony earlier that said theft represented a very small portion of this. It's 20%. The balance are straw purchases. It's not through private sales. Chronically recidivist criminals that have been put back on the streets commit the overwhelming majority of gun crimes. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, 70.2% of released prisoners with the highest rearrest rates are those that had already been imprisoned for possessing, using, or selling illegal weapons. These criminals do not, nor will they ever, go through a universal background check. I respectfully ask this body to pursue improving the integrity of our current background check system, aggressively enforce laws that prohibit the illegal transfer of firearm sales, such as straw purchases, and curb the continual re-release of reoffending criminals into our society. These are the keys to the effective reduction of gun crime. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cohen.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if he wouldn't mind if I could ask Mr. Vick to answer a couple of questions, if that'd be
Mr.
okay.
Vick,
Mr. Vick, from your testimony, my inference is that you're a highly responsible, reliable individual, somebody who takes those responsibilities quite seriously and has given some thought to them. Here's my concern, though, because I accept your testimony when you described some of the percentages and talked about, I'm going to misstate this, but 10% and so on. But we had the testimony of Mayor Ryback relative to Susan Berkowitz and the person she murdered. I happen to know Susan Berkowitz, or did know her. She was a constituent of mine, and in fact knew the parents of the woman who was murdered. In fact, the woman's mother is a former ambassador to the Netherlands. And Susan Berkowitz was able to get a gun apparently through some private sale. Relative to the testimony of, I'm not sure of her name, but Ms. Seifert, if that's the correct. Pardon? Streifert, I'm sorry. There's been a theme of inconvenience, of, I think, a fear of registration, which I don't quite understand. If we can save a handful of lives by the passage of a strong, and I accept the testimony about there are weaknesses in the system that have to be corrected and things that ought to be done to make sure the system is strengthened. But assuming that's all done, is the inconvenience to thousands of gun owners who are responsible, reliable, like yourself, is that inconvenience something that is paramount and more important than saving what might be viewed as a very small number of lives?
Mr. Chair, Senator Cohen, let me respond to that in that I made no reference in my testimony to inconvenience whatsoever.
I understand that.
And so that question is probably better directed to someone other than myself. But to answer your question, this isn't a matter of inconvenience. We're inconvenienced in a number of ways for a number of good reasons that help protect citizens. This is a matter of right, and most importantly, the Second Amendment right that we all have. So it's not a matter of being inconvenienced in this, and when you say saving a handful of lives, I value human life as much as anyone. There are much more effective ways to save human lives than to foist feel-good, knee-jerk, politically expedient bills to make the public think that something's being done for the common good, for the safety of everyone. And this doesn't do that. This doesn't do that. What this does is put restrictions on 10% of the population of law-abiding citizens in their right to bear arms. Attached to that, what you're not doing is you're not addressing. Now, I've heard some things in some other bills that were very heartening to me. I'm very, very much behind making sure that we act on recidivism, that we act on gun crimes, the current legislation that we have, that we need to enforce, that we don't enforce. Those things need to be taken very seriously. There are laws in effect to do that. So if you want to save lives, please focus on the important issues in addressing that issue, not costing the rights of 10% of.
Thank you. Just so the committee knows, we have 2 minutes left, and Senator Ortman has a question. I'd like to ask Professor Olson a question as well. So go ahead. Senator
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me try to do this quickly. Then maybe we could just go a couple minutes over, so we could have the questions for Senator Ortman. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vick, is it your testimony then that passage of this law would under no circumstance save a single additional life with a single background check?
Mr. Chair.
This will never work with anybody, anywhere, anytime.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Cohen, I've answered the question. The question was, do we want to infringe on the rights of 10% of law-abiding citizens? And my answer is no.
Well,